Hi, I'm the True Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Last year we talked about Lords of Shadows, and this year, as I said last time, we were covering Mirror of Fate. Ironically enough, this was one of the first few games I ever got for my 3DS, since it was mostly cheap at the time because, well, the game didn't sell very well due to not only just poor reviews but poor optimization on it as well. Since the game did not run, I could just straight up say, it barely ran at 30 frames a second at times. Though in the game's defense, it was never supposed to be a 3DS game, that happened after the fact. You see, originally it was going to be a console game until Konami decided to put it on the 3DS, which caused a lot of the problems that happened with the game, and well, you know what happened. They did later on reveal and release an HD version for everywhere else, which basically shores up the game's, performance in pretty much every way, but otherwise, it's practically the same game. Though to speak on performance for a moment, you might notice throughout the review, for some reason, two of the videos might look different, like one looks fine and other has just some black edges out. What's up with that? That's mostly because of something happening with the recording. For some such reason, I could not record in full screen at 180p. I'm not sure what happened, it just does that. I tried multiple times trying to figure out what the hell went on with it. It just does that. And really, going back to the reviews for a moment, there is one review out there that is just so baffling to me that I quite honestly make this review to really respond to the original IGN review, because it is by far one of the more baffling-esque reviews I've ever seen. Basically, it seems to not understand what the game's trying to do and just getting annoyed that it's a reboot and trying to be its own thing while paying homage to the original. And I feel like that's a real problem. But we can discuss more of that in this review of Mirror of Fate. Also, before I continue on, I'm just going to assume you've seen Lords of Shadows 1. So, if I just say something that happens in that game, you know. I don't like usually talking about something and not referencing what's happened before, since it's helpful and important to making sure that you guys know what I'm talking about. So, go watch that review real quick if you haven't seen the game, or if you have played the game and don't want to watch that review. Okay, as long as you know what I'm talking about, okay? The game begins with a minor intro with Gabriel Belmont, the protagonist of Lords of Shadows. During this intro, we learn that Gabriel actually had a son, though this child was taken away before he actually learned of it. Taken by the Brotherhood to mostly train him up so that basically when the time came that Gabriel fell into darkness, which he did, they would actually have someone to actually fight him as a piece of the Mirror of Fate, I'll explain that in a minute, basically showed off that, yeah, Gabriel was going to fall into darkness, and the only one who would be strong enough is another Belmont. We then cut to a few years later, where basically they explain, yeah, Gabriel fell to darkness, the Brotherhood is kind of fucked up, now nobody knows what's happening anymore, as we now go into our next character, that being Simon Belmont, who's basically running away from Dracula's attack on his village as his mother dies, trying to protect him. And now, Simon, as an adult, begins his journey to Dracula's castle to begin his assault on it, hoping to gain revenge for his mother. And on his journey, he meets someone called the Lost Soul. The Lost Soul basically says, hand gestures, we'll explain that in a moment, basically saying that he's willing to help him and try to guide him to where he needs to go. And he accepts. And during the journey, he's not the only one he meets, as throughout the journey, he sees a lot of weird events going on where he sees another person. This person is actually helping him, and only meets him one time, where they basically agree that they're both after Dracula and agree to work with each other. However, near the end, we learn that the other person is actually Alucard, the son of Dracula. And then the game transitions over to Alucard's side, where basically he thinks to know what's more going on, but is unwilling to say much of anything, being very confused about Simon's presence here and very shocked about it. And basically the game kind of just keeps going on in that direction for a little bit until the end, where basically he fights Dracula and they win. However, it's stated that basically he didn't kill Dracula, they just defeated him, though how the hell they know that is very unclear. Actually, how does one defeat Dracula here? Or at least like a permanent defeat. You know what I mean? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, throughout the journey, or at least the time they actually talk to each other, which is actually just the one time, Simon asks him how did he know his father. However, Alucard is unable to answer him, as the truth would be too much. Then the game transitions into Trevor Belmont, the father of Simon Belmont, where basically Trevor has learned the truth about Gabriel and is basically now on his way to defeat Dracula. And well, we know how that ends up. And during this time, he also meets the Lost Soul, who is able to talk at this point and basically tells him that you're going to fail and you're going to fail hard. And also your family's going to suffer, which just agitates Trevor a lot and attacks him. And it's why his face is all shattered. However, the Lost Soul was correct, as after trying to fight Dracula, he fails miserably and is unable to defeat him. But not before revealing the truth to Dracula about their connection. And Gabriel, in shock of what he had done, tries to revive him and make him into a vampire. However, it does not work immediately, and thus he entombs him, giving him the new name of Alucard. And the game ends with the Lost Soul asking for a piece of the mirror shard that Simon had for the longest time. Basically, Alucard saying, just give it up. Trust me on this, you don't want it. And the Lost Soul takes it as the castle shutters around them, with Simon watching from afar as Alucard leaves to do his own thing, ending Mirror of Fate. As you might have noticed, the plot of Mirror of Fate is really sparse. Very simplistic. I didn't even mention any other things like the Griffin or the Demon guy. For one thing, they're not truly important to the plot, so it didn't really even matter if I even mentioned him. And even if I did mention him, he would only be a sparse thing I would mention, like, oh yeah, we fight this one guy. Not because he really matters to anything happening in the moment, he's just here. And therein lies kind of my problem with the story of, well, Mirror of Fate. It is just that simplistic. I went over everything that happened that is majorly important. I left out that the Mirror of Fate shard was with him and why the mirror was so important, but that doesn't really even matter for this plot in and of itself. Because here's the thing, the Mirror of Fate is something that was in the last game, but really didn't even come up once. In fact, the Mirror of Fate is barely even elaborated on in this game. And the oddity is, I thought they would because the next game deals with the shards of the Mirror of Fate, and the importance of it for that game. In fact, this game sets up a few plot points in that game that elaborates on a few things that the game just kind of doesn't want to elaborate on. Which is very surprising, as they made this game a little too important, but at the same time not really that important. I also want to go into the IGN review that called the plot confusing. Because, how? Like, I'm genuinely confused on how the hell they got confused about this plot. The plot is so simplistic, as I mentioned before. I really didn't leave anything out. There's nothing to this plot. It's a very so bare bones, I kind of felt insulted. Because I think the game was trying to do something thematically with the idea of fate about how the characters handle their fate. Gabriel stuck to his path, unable to change it, and just accepts it for what it is and does not question it, even at his own time where he must just do what he must. Trevor stuck in his fate, damning it all the while fulfilling it. Alucard, who now knows his fate, feels it, but tries his best to avoid it, or the harm that causes it, and Simon, the one who doesn't even know what the fuck his fate even is, and not even the greater machinations around him. There's something there, but I'm not sure if I even understand it entirely. And I feel like even talking about this feels like I'm going way more than I should, because again, I don't think the plot is even that good. It's fine, it's a generic story, there's not much to it, and most of the cutscenes don't even matter to or even amount to much. And that's mostly because the game is focused on its gameplay, which is fine. I'm just confused on why it bothered. You know what I mean? Partially, one of the reasons why I think I'm so weirded out by the story's plot is mostly because of the weird style behind it. You see, some of the cutscenes in the game look like this. And you might be saying to me, what's the problem? Only certain cutscenes use this style. So the fact that they use them for these style and only here just weirds me out. because the rest of the game is just more of the realistic, painted-esque look. So for them to put this much effort into this one style that only matters for the cutscenes, or at least the story cutscene, weirded me out, and kind of made me question why they didn't just make that one the more style for this game. Like, overall, I think this style looks great. Has a unique look to it, while still keeping the idea of what they're trying to do and go for really interesting. Not to say that the game doesn't look good on its own, it does, it's just, you know, why waste the time and effort just to make this one style for a small part of the game? You know what I mean? So let's actually begin talking about the gameplay, because what else is there to talk about? The gameplay is a basic 2.5D of Lords of Shadows. So it has a basic horizontal and vertical attack with a block, counter, dodge roll, and all that jazz. There are secondary weapons, sub-weapons, that kind of work like the normal Castlevannia games where you just find them from drop-down enemies or by finding heart containers and all that jazz. This forms the basics of the combat, and pretty much is the combat for all intents and purposes. Throughout the game, you can level up and gain new attacks, but more times than not, you don't need to worry about them, like, at all. Like, the basic attack is more than enough for the rest of the game. And to say that the game focuses on the combat is not true. It's actually pretty even keel with the platforming and the puzzles, which are more numerous throughout the entire game. And I would say a lot of the puzzles were really well designed, thinking some of them took me some actual brain cells in me. And the platforming is a little okay. I'm not a platformer, but I find the use of it okay. Though there is one aspect of the game I really want to talk about because it's an interesting idea to talk about. That being, a lot of people have compared this game to being a Metroidvania. And while I'm not disagreeing with that on a fundamental level, I think on a design level, it's not trying to be. Because sure, you can backtrack and gain power-ups that allow you to go back and gain some upgrades. There's nothing really telling you to go back and explore, or there are other places to go. There is only one direction you need to go, and that's forward, or up, or basically wherever the red dot here tells you to go. There's no real exploration in any real sense. So calling it a Metroidvania in my mind feels off. Like, the only time the game ever asks you to actually explore is to gain an upgrade just to be able to progress to the final boss, or at least the final part of the game, which is very weird that it does that for Simon and nowhere else. And the upgrades you find are nothing more than just health upgrades, item upgrades, and all that jazz. Basically, nothing that really adds to your kit, only just improves what you already have, which is just there. In fact, quite honestly, I'm surprised that they even bother making backtracking even a thing in this game when really there's nothing to do other than the main plot. And I would think the game would try to focus more on the combat to try to make it more interesting, but it's really not. Like I said earlier, the combat is so basic that the basic attacks are all you ever need throughout the entire game. And I have heard some people in other reviews say that this gameplay feels reminiscent of Devil May Cry, which, can I just say as a fan of Devil May Cry, stop comparing it to Devil May Cry. Compare it to something else. I don't know, God of War, something. Because calling it Devil May Cry is stupid because those two games have different design ideas about how they want to focus on combat. For fuck's sakes, people. And the game does actually force combat a few times, so again, I'm a little confused on why the weird focus on it. To at least give the game some more positives, I do think the music does its job well enough. It has enough differences between each track to feel different to each other while still feeling all encompassing of the general feel of the game, which feels accurate to it, my belief at least. Ironically enough, the theater song was actually my favorite. I'm not sure why. If somebody ever asked me, like, for real, why, I couldn't give you a good answer. I just like it. And generally, weirdly enough, I'm actually kind of out of things to talk about. I've already talked about the story, the gameplay, the music, the graphics, and everything else. Though actually, there is one minor thing because I didn't really have a good place to put this. They changed the UI for some reason, or at least this part, up here where the HP bar and stuff. They changed it from the DS, which I thought the DS one would look better. I'm not sure why they did that. In any case, at the end of the day, Mirror of Fate is a mediocre game at best. At its best, it tries to be fine, and I can enjoy for what it is. But at other times, I'm like, why am I even here, man? As I state, it's a pretty mediocre game throughout it all. The story is very flat, but it does tell a competent story at least. The graphics look fine, though I feel as though it could have more enhanced itself by choosing one particular style for the gameplay story. The gameplay is fine. It doesn't really utilize the Metroidvania part of it all that much, thus I'm a little confused on why they even bother adding it, and the music is pretty fine. And really, if you can get this game for like, what, $5? It's pretty good, I would recommend it. But, really, this game being forgotten and belied throughout its time is not unearned. Next time when we talk about Castlevannia, we'll be talking about Lords of Shadow 2. See you then.